She never raised her voice. She never cried in front of him. She never begged him to understand her. She just smiled, picked up her bag, and walked out of his life so calmly that he didn't even realize the door had closed until it was too late. That, my friend, is not coldness. That is intelligence. And today, I am going to show you exactly how smart, self-respecting women handle men who don't deserve their energy without losing their peace, their dignity, or themselves in the process. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever dealt with a man who talked over you, dismissed your feelings, or made you feel small just to feel big himself? If yes, type your country and your age in the comments right now. I want to see how far this feeling travels, because trust me, this is not a local problem. This is a universal one. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, because we talk about real life, real relationships, and real growth on this channel. No sugarcoating, just truth. Now let's get into it. What stupid really means here. Let's clear something up before we go any further, because I don't want you to misunderstand the title of this talk. When we say stupid men, we are not talking about intelligence in the way school talks about it. We are not talking about degrees or report cards or how many books someone has read. A man can be a doctor, an engineer, a business owner, and still be exactly the kind of stupid we are talking about today. What we are really talking about is emotional stupidity. We are talking about a man who cannot read a room, a man who says the wrong thing at the wrong time and doesn't even notice the damage he caused. A man who thinks silence means agreement and tears mean weakness. A man who confuses respect with obedience and confidence with arrogance. A man who has never once asked himself, why does she always go quiet around me? Because he is too busy thinking he is always right. This is the kind of stupidity that has nothing to do with intelligence quotient and everything to do with emotional intelligence or the complete lack of it. It is the stupidity of ego. It is the stupidity of a man who would rather win an argument than keep the relationship. It is the stupidity of someone who mistakes control for love and jealousy for care. And here is the important part. Intelligent women are not immune to meeting these men. In fact, sometimes they attract them more because a strong, kind, understanding woman often becomes a magnet for a certain type of man who wants to be handled, managed, and emotionally carried without ever doing the same in return. So this talk is not about how to avoid these men completely, because sometimes you cannot avoid them. A boss, a brother, a father, a colleague, or yes, sometimes even a partner. This talk is about how intelligent women deal with them once they show up, how they protect their peace, how they hold their ground, and how they walk away with their dignity fully intact. Why smart women end up dealing with this. There is a strange pattern that many women notice at some point in life, and if you have felt this, you are not imagining it. The more emotionally mature a woman becomes, the more she seems to run into emotionally immature men. Why does this happen? Part of the answer is simple. Intelligent, self-aware women are usually kind. They are patient. They give people the benefit of the doubt. They believe that if they explain themselves clearly enough, calmly enough, and kindly enough, the other person will eventually understand. This is a beautiful quality, but it can also become a trap, because some men are not confused. They understand perfectly well. They simply do not care to change, because your patience has made their bad behavior comfortable for them. Another part of the answer is about self-esteem. A man who lacks confidence in himself is often drawn to a woman who is calm, capable, and put together, because being near her makes him feel like he is also capable and put together, even though he has done nothing to earn that feeling. He borrows her light instead of building his own. And when she eventually asks him to grow, to communicate, to take responsibility, he feels threatened because it exposes the truth that he was never actually equal to her, with simply standing in her shadow and calling it partnership. This is why intelligent women often find themselves exhausted in relationships, friendships, or workplaces with men like this. Not because the women are doing anything wrong, but because they are carrying two people's emotional weight, while only one person is aware that any weight exists at all. Understanding this is the first step, because once you understand why this pattern keeps happening, you stop blaming yourself for it. You stop asking, what is wrong with me that I keep attracting this? and you start asking the much more useful question. How do I respond to this in a way that protects me? That is exactly what we are going to talk about now. They don't argue, they observe. The first thing you will notice about an intelligent woman when she is dealing with a difficult, immature, or arrogant man is this. She does not rush to argue. She watches first. Most people, when they feel disrespected or provoked, react instantly. Words fly out, voices rise, and within minutes, what could have been a small misunderstanding turns into a full-blown fight that neither person even remembers the real cause of by the end. An intelligent woman knows this trap well, and she refuses to fall into it. Instead, when a man says something rude, dismissive, or foolish, she pauses. She observes. She asks herself silently, is this who he really is, or is this just a bad moment? She watches his pattern over time instead of reacting to a single event. This is powerful because patterns tell the truth that single moments hide. A man might have one bad day and snap at you. That happens to all of us. And it does not necessarily make him a bad person. But a man who repeatedly disrespects you, repeatedly dismisses your feelings, repeatedly makes you feel small, that is not a bad day. That is a personality. And the only way to tell the difference is by observing, not reacting. This is why you will rarely see an emotionally intelligent woman getting into shouting for matches. It is not because she does not feel anger, she absolutely does. Anger is a completely valid emotion, and pretending not to feel it is not intelligence. That is suppression, and suppression always leaks out eventually in unhealthy ways. The difference is what she does with that anger. Instead of throwing it at him in the heat of the moment, she holds it, studies it, and lets it inform her decision-making instead of her outburst. Think about it like this. If you are playing chess against someone, you don't scream at every move they make. You watch. You study their strategy. You wait for the right moment to make your move, calmly and with purpose. Intelligent women treat difficult men the same way, not because they see relationships as a game to be won, but because they understand that reacting emotionally to every provocation only gives the other person power over your peace. There is also something deeply strategic about this kind of observation. When you argue immediately, you show your entire hand. The other person knows exactly what upsets you, what triggers you, what makes you lose your composure. And some men, especially the manipulative kind, will use this information against you later. But when you observe instead of argue, you keep your reactions private. You keep your power to yourself. You decide how and when to respond, instead of being controlled by the impulse to react the second something happens. This does not mean she stays silent forever. It does not mean she lets disrespect slide without consequence. It simply means her response, when it comes, is deliberate. It is chosen. It is not an explosion. It is a decision. And there is a world of difference between the two. They set boundaries without over-explaining. Here is something that many women, especially kind and thoughtful women, struggle with: the belief that every boundary needs a long explanation to be valid. We think, if I just explain myself well enough, he will understand why this hurts me, why this is not okay, why I need this space. And so we explain and re-explain and explain again, hoping that somewhere in all those words, the truth will finally land. But here is what intelligent women eventually learn, often the hard way. Some people do not lack understanding, they lack willingness. And no amount of explanation can create willingness in someone who has decided, consciously or unconsciously, that your comfort does not matter as much as their convenience. This is why intelligent women stop over-explaining their boundaries. Not because they don't respect the other person enough to explain, but because they've learned that a boundary does not need to be justified to be valid. I'm not comfortable with that is a complete sentence. I need space right now is a complete sentence. This conversation is over for tonight is a complete sentence. You do not owe anyone a legal defense for protecting your own peace. Think about how differently a boundary lands when it is stated simply versus when it is over-explained. When you say simply, I won't be spoken to that way, there is a quiet strength in it. It shows that this is not up for debate. But when you say, I won't be spoken to that way, because when you raise your voice, it reminds me of when my father used to yell, and it makes me feel small and unsafe, and I've been working on my self-esteem, and I really need you to understand how deeply this affects me. You have just handed the other person a dozen new angles to argue with, dismiss, or twist against you, A man who is not emotionally mature will not hear your vulnerability as a reason to be gentler. He will often hear it as an opening to argue why your feelings are wrong, exaggerated, or your fault. Intelligent women protect their vulnerability by not spilling it out to people who have not earned it. This does not mean they are cold or closed off. It means they are selective. They save the long, deep, vulnerable explanations for people who have proven, through consistent actions, that they will handle that vulnerability with care. For everyone else, especially for men who repeatedly disrespect them, they keep it simple, clear, short, firm. There's a beautiful phrase that captures this well. No is a complete sentence. You don't need 3 paragraphs and a bibliography to justify why you don't want to be treated poorly. The moment you find yourself over-explaining a boundary to someone who keeps crossing it, anyway, that is usually a sign that the problem was never a lack of understanding on his part. It was a lack of respect. And respect cannot be explained into existence. It either exists or it doesn't. They chase validation. One of the most freeing shifts that happens in an intelligent woman's life is the moment she stops needing a man's approval to feel like she matters. This shift does not happen overnight, and for most women, it comes after years of trying to be understood, trying to be enough, trying to prove her worth to someone who was never going to see it, no matter what she did. Here is the truth that changes everything. Some men are not going to validate you, no matter how perfect you are. It is not about you. It is about them. A man who does not respect women in general, who has unresolved issues with his mother, his ex, or his own insecurities, will find something to criticize in any woman, no matter how kind, smart, or accomplished she is. If you are quiet, he calls you boring. If you are expressive, he calls you dramatic. If you are successful, he feels threatened. If you are supportive, he takes you for granted. There is no version of you that satisfies a man who was never looking for a partner. He was looking for someone to blame, control, or feel superior to. Once an intelligent woman understands this, something inside her relaxes. She stops performing. She stops shrinking herself to avoid his insecurity, and she stops expanding herself to try to impress him. She simply exists as herself, and if he cannot appreciate that, she understands that this says everything about him and nothing about her. This is incredibly hard to do, especially if you were raised to believe that being good enough means earning approval from the people around you. But intelligent women eventually realize that seeking validation from someone who is not emotionally capable of giving it is like asking a person with no hands to give you a high five. It's not that you're not worthy of it. It's that they simply do not have what it takes to give it to you. And no amount of waiting, hoping, or trying harder will change that. So instead of chasing his approval, she turns inward. She asks herself, do I approve of how I handled that situation? Do I respect the way I spoke, the way I acted, the way I protected myself? And when the answer is yes, that becomes enough. Not because she doesn't care what others think at all. We are human, and of course, we care to some degree. But because she has learned to place the opinions of emotionally unavailable, immature, or disrespectful people exactly where they belong, outside of her decision-making process. This is one of the quiet superpowers of emotionally intelligent women. They know the difference between people whose opinions are worth considering and people whose opinions are simply noise. And a man who consistently disrespects you, dismisses you, or diminishes you does not get a vote in how you see yourself. His opinion of you is not a mirror, it is a reflection of him. They use silence as power, not punishment. There is a big difference between silent treatment used as a weapon and silence used as wisdom, and intelligent women understand this difference deeply. Silent treatment, the kind used to punish, is manipulative. It's meant to make the other person anxious, confused, guessing at what they did wrong, desperate to fix things. This is not what we're talking about here, and honestly, this behavior isn't limited to men. Anyone, man or woman, who uses silence to control another person's emotions is engaging in a form of manipulation, and it is not healthy no matter who does it. What we're talking about instead is strategic, self-protective silence. This is the silence a woman chooses when she realizes that a conversation has stopped being productive and has become nothing but noise. It's the silence she chooses when she notices that no matter what she says, the man in front of her is not listening to understand. He is only listening to respond. defend, or attack. In moments like these, intelligent women understand a simple truth. Not every silence is empty. Some silences are full of decisions being made, full of boundaries being drawn, full of a woman quietly choosing herself over the exhausting effort of trying to be understood by someone who has already decided not to understand. There's an old saying that fits perfectly here: never argue with a fool, because from a distance, people won't be able to tell who is who. An intelligent woman knows that engaging every single time she is provoked does not make her too strong. It makes her tired. So instead, she picks her battles. She lets small, foolish comments pass without a reaction, not because she is weak, but because she understands that not everything deserves her energy. Her silence in these moments is not defeat. It is selection. It is her deciding, this does not deserve my words. And here's something powerful. This kind of calm, chosen silence often unsettles emotionally immature men far more than shouting ever could. A man who is used to getting a reaction, who thrives on drama, who feels powerful when he sees you upset, does not know what to do when you simply don't give him that reaction anymore. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects his own foolishness back at him, and there is nothing more uncomfortable for an insecure man than seeing his own behavior clearly, with no chaos to hide behind. So the next time you see a woman stay quiet in the face of disrespect, don't assume she has nothing to say. Often, she has everything to say. She has simply decided that this moment, this person, does not deserve to hear it. They detach emotionally when needed. Emotional detachment gets a bad reputation, as if it means becoming cold or heartless. But real emotional detachment, the kind that intelligent women practice, is not about shutting off your heart. It's about protecting it. Here is what this looks like in real life. A man says something hurtful, dismissive, or cruel. The old response, the response many of us were taught, whether we realized it or not, is to internalize it. To ask yourself, what did I do to deserve that? What's wrong with me? How can I fix this? This response ties your emotional state directly to his words and actions, which means he now has the power to control how you feel, simply by choosing what he says or does. An intelligent woman learns to disconnect this wire. When he says something hurtful, she asks a different question. Not, what's wrong with me? But, what's going on with him that he felt the need to say that? This single shift in questioning changes everything, because it moves the responsibility for his words back to where it belongs, with him. His cruelty is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his own pain, insecurity, or immaturity, expressed in an unhealthy way. Emotional detachment also means she doesn't let his mood dictate her day. If he wakes up irritated and starts snapping at everyone around him, she does not absorb that irritation and carry it with her for the rest of the day. She recognizes, that's his storm, not mine, and she continues about her day with her own peace intact. This might sound simple, but it is actually one of the hardest emotional skills to develop, because most of us are wired, especially through childhood conditioning, to take responsibility for the moods of the people around us, particularly the moods of people we love or depend on. Detachment doesn't mean she stops caring about him if he's someone she loves. It means she stops making his emotional state her responsibility to manage. There's a difference between supporting someone through a hard time and carrying their fun emotional baggage as if it were your own. Intelligent women learn to hold compassion for the people in their lives without absorbing every wave of negativity those people produce. This kind of detachment also shows up in how she handles conflict. Instead of getting swept up in the emotional intensity of an argument, she stays anchored. She might feel the pull to react, to defend herself loudly, to match his energy, but she consciously chooses not to get swept away by that pull. She stays rooted in her own calm, even when the storm around her is loud. And staying rooted like this, again and again, over time, builds a kind of emotional strength that cannot be shaken easily by any one person's bad behavior. They don't try to fix or save him. This next point might be one of the hardest lessons an intelligent woman ever has to learn, because it goes against everything she may have been taught about love, patience, and loyalty. The lesson is this: it is not your job to fix him. So many women, especially kind, nurturing, emotionally intelligent women, fall into what we might call the potential trap. They meet a man who has flashes of goodness, moments of charm, glimpses of what he could be if only he worked on himself, and they fall in love with that potential instead of the reality standing in front of them. They think, if I just love him enough, support him enough, understand him enough, he will grow into the man I see in him. And so they pour years of energy, patience, and emotional labor into a project that was never actually theirs to complete. Here is the hard truth that intelligent women eventually come to understand. You cannot love someone into emotional maturity. You cannot explain someone into self-awareness. You cannot give someone enough chances that they finally decide to respect you. Growth, real growth, has to come from within a person. It has to be something he wants for himself, not something you want badly enough for both of you. When a woman finally understands this, something shifts in how she approaches relationships and interactions with difficult men. She stops trying to be his therapist, his teacher, his emotional translator, and his motivational speaker all at once. She recognizes that these are not roles a partner, a colleague, or even a family member should have to constantly play for another grown adult. She can offer support, she can offer honesty, she can offer patience within reason, but she cannot and will not sacrifice her own well-being, trying to drag another adult toward emotional maturity that he has shown no real interest in, reaching himself. This is not coldness. This is one of the most loving things a woman can do, both for herself and, indirectly, for him, because a man who is constantly rescued from the consequences of his own immaturity never has a reason to change. It is often only when a woman stops fixing, stops covering, stops making excuses, that a man is finally faced with the natural consequences of his own behavior, and only then does he have any real chance of growth. Her stepping back is not abandonment. Sometimes it is the very thing that gives him the space to finally grow up, or the clarity to show her, once and for all, that he never intended to. They use humor as a shield. There is a certain kind of quiet confidence that shows up as humor, and intelligent women use it beautifully. Instead of getting visibly rattled by a foolish comment, an insecure jab, or an attempt to provoke her, she meets it with a light joke, a raised eyebrow, a calm laugh, and somehow, this response disarms the situation far more effectively than anger ever could. Think about it this way. When you get visibly upset at a foolish comment, you're giving it weight. You're telling the person, and everyone watching, that comment mattered enough to shake me. But when you respond with humor, with a light, is that really the best you've got? Energy, you're communicating something very different. You're saying, that comment was so unimpressive it didn't even land. This is incredibly powerful, especially in front of an audience. Whether that audience is friends, family, or co-workers, because it repositions the entire dynamic. Instead of looking like a victim of his rudeness, she looks like someone completely unbothered by it, and unbothered is a position of enormous power. Humor also allows an intelligent woman to point out foolish behavior without escalating into a full conflict. A well-placed joke can highlight a double standard, call out hypocrisy, or gently mock an unreasonable demand, all while keeping the tone light enough that it doesn't spiral into an argument. This takes real emotional skill, the ability to be sharp and funny under pressure, instead of defensive and reactive. Of course, this doesn't mean every single hurtful comment should be brushed off with a joke. Some situations call for seriousness, for firm boundaries, for direct confrontation. Intelligent women know the difference. Humor is not used to avoid dealing with real issues. It's used as one tool among many, chosen deliberately for situations where lightness is actually the strongest response available. And there is something almost artful about a woman who can make a room laugh at the exact moment someone tried to make her feel small, because in that moment, everyone sees clearly who actually has the upper hand. They protect their energy and peace above everything. If there is one value that intelligent women hold above almost everything else in their dealings with difficult people, it is this: peace is not negotiable. This might sound like a simple idea, but living it out is anything but simple, especially in a world that often praises women for being endlessly patient, endlessly available, and endlessly forgiving, no matter how much they are mistreated. Somewhere along the way, many women were taught that a good woman tolerates everything, forgives everything, and never gives up on anyone. Intelligent women eventually unlearn this. They come to understand that peace is not something you should have to sacrifice repeatedly to prove your love, loyalty, or patience. Protecting her peace means an intelligent woman starts asking a very simple, very powerful question before engaging with difficult behavior. Is this worth my energy right now? Not every rude comment deserves a response. Not every provocation deserves engagement. Not every disagreement needs to become a war. She learns to filter her energy the way a smart investor filters where they put their money. Not everything gets her time, her attention, or her emotional investment, because energy, like money, is a limited resource, and spending it carelessly on people who don't value it leaves you with nothing left for the people and goals that actually matter. This also shows up in how she structures her life around difficult people. If a certain topic always leads to conflict with a certain man, she may simply choose not to bring it up unless absolutely necessary. If being around a certain person always leaves her feeling drained afterward, she starts limiting how much time she spends around him, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. This isn't about avoiding all conflict or difficulty in life. Sometimes hard conversations that are necessary and healthy. It's about recognizing the difference between productive difficulty, which leads somewhere good, and pointless difficulty, which just leaves you exhausted with nothing gained. Protecting her peace also means she gets very comfortable with a word that many women were taught to avoid. No, I won't discuss this right now. No, I won't accept being spoken to that way. No, I won't stay in a conversation that has turned disrespectful. This word, used calmly and consistently, becomes one of the strongest tools an intelligent woman has, because it draws a clear line between what she will tolerate and what she won't. And lines like these, once drawn clearly and held consistently, tend to be respected, even by people who initially tried to push past them. They raise their standards, not their voice. Here is something beautiful about truly intelligent women. When they are unhappy with how they're being treated, their first move is rarely to yell louder. Their first move is to quietly raise the bar for what they will accept. This is a subtle but massive shift in mindset. Many people, when mistreated, focus their energy on trying to change the other person's behavior through argument, persuasion, or emotional appeal. If I just explain how this hurts me enough times, he'll stop doing it. Intelligent women eventually realize that this approach puts all the power in the other person's hands. It makes her well-being dependent on his willingness to change, which, as we discussed earlier, is often outside of her control entirely. Instead, she shifts the focus back onto something she does control, her own standards. Instead of asking, how do I get him to stop being disrespectful, she asks, what am I willing to continue accepting, and what am I not? This question doesn't require his cooperation at all. It only requires her own clarity and her own courage to act on that clarity. When a woman raises her standards, it doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like simply not responding to a text that feels manipulative. Sometimes it looks like declining a second date with someone who showed a red flag on the first one instead of hoping it was just a bad day. Sometimes it looks like calmly ending a friendship that has become one-sided. None of these actions require yelling, arguing, or trying to convince anyone of anything. They simply require a woman to decide, quietly but firmly, what she will and will not allow into her life. This is one of the reasons why emotionally intelligent women often seem so calm, even in situations that would make others furious. Their calm doesn't come from not caring. It comes from having already decided, ahead of time, what their standards are. So when someone crosses that line, there's no internal confusion or debate. There's simply a clear, calm recognition. This does not meet my standard, followed by whatever action that recognition requires, whether that's a conversation, a boundary, or simply walking away. Raising your standards is not about becoming unreasonable or impossible to please. It's about deciding that your baseline for respect, kindness, and consideration is not up for negotiation, no matter how charming, persistent, or familiar the person crossing it might be. They walk away without drama. Perhaps the most powerful skill an intelligent woman develops, and often the hardest one to master, is the ability to walk away without turning it into a war. We've all seen breakups, friendship endings, or family conflicts that turn into ugly, drawn-out battles, public arguments, mutual friends being pulled into taking sides, months of bitter messages back and forth. And we've also seen the opposite, someone who simply, quietly, decides that a relationship or a person is no longer good for them, and leaves with grace, without needing to burn everything down on the way out. Intelligent women learn to walk away the second way, not because they don't feel hurt, angry, or betrayed. Those feelings are often very real and very valid, but because they understand a simple truth. Revenge, drama, and public arguments rarely make you feel better in the long run. They tend to keep you emotionally tied to a person or situation you're actually trying to leave behind. Every angry message, every dramatic confrontation, every attempt to win, the ending keeps you looped into the same toxic energy you're supposedly trying to escape. So instead, an intelligent woman chooses a quieter exit. She says what needs to be said, once, clearly and calmly. She doesn't need the last word in every argument, because she understands that needing the last word is often more about ego than about resolution. She doesn't need him to admit he was wrong, because she knows that some people will never admit fault, no matter how much evidence is placed in front of them, and waiting for that admission only delays her own healing. This calm way of leaving often confuses people who were expecting drama. A man who mistreated her might brace himself for screaming, crying, accusations, and instead, he's met with quiet, composed distance. This can be unsettling for someone who thrives on emotional chaos, because it denies him the reaction he was expecting, the reaction that would have given him a sense of control or importance in her life, even a negative kind of importance. Walking away without drama doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It doesn't mean staying friendly with someone who hurt you or acting like nothing happened. It simply means choosing to protect your own peace on the way out, rather than sacrificing it for one final, dramatic confrontation. The most powerful exit is often the quietest one, the one where you simply stop showing up, stop explaining, and start focusing your energy on your own life instead. The real mindset shift behind all of this. If you look closely at every single point we've covered so far, the observing instead of arguing, the boundaries without over-explaining, the refusal to chase validation, the strategic silence, the emotional detachment, the refusal to fix him, the humor, the protected peace, the raised standards, and the graceful exits, you'll notice they all come from one single root idea: self-respect over ego battles. This is the real mindset shift that separates intelligent women from anyone else navigating difficult relationships. It's not about being smarter in the traditional sense. It's not about winning every argument or having the perfect comeback ready at all times. It's about deciding, deep down, that your own peace, dignity, and self-respect matter more than proving a point, more than being understood by someone incapable of understanding, and more than holding on to something or someone simply out of fear, habit, or hope. This shift usually doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, often through painful experiences, through relationships that taught hard lessons, through moments of exhaustion that finally led to clarity. Somewhere along that journey, a woman starts to realize that she has been spending enormous amounts of energy trying to be understood by people who were never going to put in the effort to understand her, and that energy could be spent instead on building her own life, her own goals, her own happiness. Once this shift happens, everything changes. She stops seeing every disagreement as something she needs to win. She stops seeing every disrespectful comment as something she needs to correct. She stops seeing every difficult man as a puzzle she needs to solve. Instead, she starts seeing her own reactions, her own boundaries, and her own choices as the only things she truly has full control over, and she starts protecting those with everything she has. This is not about becoming distant, cold, or unloving. Intelligent women are often deeply warm, deeply loving people. The difference is that they will learn to direct that warmth toward people who deserve it and can reciprocate it, rather than pouring it endlessly into situations that only take and never give back. How to build this mindset in your own life. Now, you might be listening to all of this thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I actually get there? How do I build this kind of emotional intelligence and inner strength in my own life? So let's talk about some practical steps. The first step is simple but powerful. Start noticing patterns instead of isolated incidents. The next time someone treats you poorly, resist the urge to immediately decide whether it is forgivable or not based on that single moment. Instead, start a mental note. Has this happened before? Is this a pattern or truly an isolated slip? Give yourself permission to observe over time rather than judging everything in the heat of a single moment. The second step is to practice short, clear boundary statements, even in low-stakes situations. Start small. Practice saying, "I'd rather not," or "that doesn't work for me." In everyday situations, declining an invitation, disagreeing with a suggestion, expressing a preference. The more comfortable you become setting small boundaries without over-explaining, the easier it becomes to set bigger ones when it really matters. The third step is to build your sense of self-worth from sources other than external approval. This might mean developing a skill, pursuing a passion, spending time with people who genuinely appreciate you, or simply spending intentional time alone getting to know your own thoughts and values. The stronger your internal sense of self becomes, the less power any single person's opinion, including a difficult man's opinion, has over how you feel about yourself. The fourth step is learning to sit with discomfort instead of immediately reacting to it. This is hard, especially at first. When someone says something upsetting, practice pausing before responding. Even a few seconds of pause can be the difference between a reactive outburst and a thoughtful, deliberate response. Over time, this pause becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a superpower. The fifth step is giving yourself permission to walk away, even from situations you've invested time and energy into. This is often the hardest step, because we don't like to feel like our time or effort was wasted. But staying in a draining, disrespectful situation just to avoid feeling like you wasted time in the past only guarantees that you'll waste even more time in the future. Sometimes the most intelligent decision is simply recognizing when enough is enough, and having the courage to act on that recognition. None of these steps happen overnight, and that's okay. Building this kind of emotional intelligence and inner strength is a lifelong practice, not a one-time achievement. Give yourself grace as you work on it. Every small step, every boundary set, every moment of chosen calm instead of chosen chaos is progress. A story to illustrate all of this. Let me tell you about a woman we'll call Maya, because sometimes a story makes these ideas land in a way that theory alone cannot. Maya was smart, kind, successful in her career, and had a wide circle of people who admired her. But in her personal relationship, she found herself constantly walking on eggshells. Her partner would make dismissive comments about her achievements, calling them lucky breaks instead of hard work. He would get irritated over small things and expect her to smooth things over every time. He rarely apologized, and when he did, it usually came with a but, followed by some justification for his behavior. For a long time, Maya did what many kind, patient women do. She explained herself. Again and again, she tried to help him understand how his words affected her. She made excuses for him in her own mind. He's just stressed at work. He didn't mean it that way. He'll get better once things settle down. She poured energy into a relationship that, if she were honest with herself, was only draining her more and more each month. The turning point came on an ordinary evening, nothing dramatic, no huge fight. She had just finished a long day, and instead of asking about her day, he immediately launched into a complaint about something minor she had supposedly done wrong days earlier. And in that moment, something inside Maya simply shifted. Not with anger, not with tears, just with quiet, sudden clarity. She thought to herself, I am so tired of managing his emotions while mine go completely unnoticed. She didn't explode. She didn't even argue that night. She simply said, calmly, I don't have the energy for this conversation right now, and went to bed. Over the next few weeks, she started applying everything we've talked about today, almost instinctively. She stopped over-explaining her feelings to him. She started noticing patterns instead of excusing individual incidents. She stopped trying to fix him or manage his moods. She protected her energy, spending more time with friends who genuinely valued her, and less time trying to prove her worth to someone who consistently failed to see it. Eventually, she made the decision to end the relationship. And here's the important part. She did it calmly. No screaming match. No dramatic public confrontation. Just a clear, honest conversation, followed by a quiet, dignified exit. He was, predictably, confused by her calm. He had expected tears, pleading, maybe even anger he could argue against. Instead, he got clarity and closure, delivered without unnecessary drama. Months later, Maya described that period of her life not as painful, but as clarifying. She said the hardest part wasn't leaving, it was accepting, much earlier than she wanted to, that she had been trying to earn respect from someone who was never going to fully give it, no matter what she did. Once she accepted that truth, everything else, the boundaries, the calm, the eventual exit, became so much easier. Maya's story isn't unique. Variations of it happen every single day, in relationships, friendships, and workplaces all over the world. And every time a woman reaches that same point of clarity that Maya reached, she joins a quiet, powerful group of women who have learned, often through hard experience, exactly how to protect their peace in the face of someone else's immaturity. What this is really about. Before we move into the conclusion, I want to make one thing very clear, because I don't want this talk to be misunderstood. This is not about hating men. This is not about assuming every man in your life is going to disrespect you or drain your energy. There are incredible, emotionally mature, respectful, kind men in this world. And if you have one in your life, whether as a partner, a friend, a father, or a brother, that is something to genuinely value and appreciate. This talk is about something much more specific, how to handle the moments, the relationships, or the people, of any gender really, but specifically framed here around men, who show up in our lives displaying emotional immaturity, disrespect, or foolishness, whether occasionally or consistently. The tools we've talked about today: observation instead of reaction, boundaries without over-explanation, refusing to chase validation, strategic silence, emotional detachment, refusing to fix people who don't want to be fixed, using humor wisely, protecting your peace fiercely, raising your standards quietly, and walking away with grace. These are not weapons to be used against men in general. They are tools of self-protection, self-respect, and emotional intelligence that serve any woman navigating any difficult relationship or interaction in her life. The goal was never to win against men. The goal was always to protect yourself, your peace, and your sense of self-worth, regardless of who or what challenges it. And if, along the way, this also means walking away from certain men, certain friendships, or certain situations that were never good for you in the first place, then that's not a loss. That's growth. So let's bring this all together. Intelligent women don't deal with difficult men by becoming louder, angrier, or more dramatic. They deal with them by becoming calmer, clearer, and more rooted in their own sense of self-worth. They observe before they react. They set boundaries without turning them into debates. They stop chasing approval from people who were never capable of giving it. They use silence, humor, and detachment as tools of self-protection rather than weapons of punishment. They refuse to take on the impossible job of fixing another grown adult. They protect their peace like it's the most valuable thing they own, because honestly, it is. They raise their own standards instead of begging others to meet the ones they already have. And when it's time to walk away, they do it with grace, not chaos. None of this happens overnight, and none of it makes a woman perfect or immune to pain. Intelligent women get hurt too. They cry too. They have moments of doubt, moments of exhaustion, moments where they wonder if they're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. But the difference is, they don't let those moments define how they move forward. They keep choosing themselves, again and again, even when it's hard, even when it would be easier to just accept less than they deserve. If you've made it this far in this talk, I want you to take one thing away with you today. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to set boundaries without justifying them to death. You are allowed to walk away from anyone, anything, or any situation that consistently disrespects you, no matter how much history, how much love, or how much time you've already invested. Choosing yourself is never selfish. It is one of the most intelligent decisions you will ever make. If this talk gave you even one moment of clarity today, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, because we talk about real growth, real relationships, and real self-respect right here every single week. And if you know a woman in your life, a sister, a friend, a daughter, a mother, who needs to hear this today, share this video with her. You never know whose life this small message might change. Drop a comment below and tell me which point in this talk hit you the hardest. And let's keep this conversation going. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Protect your peace, know your worth, and I'll see you in the next one.